Welcome, let's investigate a shocking case, the case of Nancy Anderson. Nancy Elaine Anderson was born on January 27th, 1952 in Bay City, Michigan, USA. She was born into a family of 10 siblings. After her father died, most of her family moved to Arvada, Colorado in June 1st, 971 to start a new life. But she did not stay in Colorado for long. Nancy had so many friends that she could not count them all. She was an extrovert in late 1971. When she was 19 years old and had just graduated from high school, she thought that moving to a new place might help her discover her purpose in life. So she moved to Hawaii to pursue her dream of living on an island. On October 21st, 1971, Nancy arrived on the beautiful island of Oahu in Hawaii. She rented an apartment on Aloha Drive and lived with Jody Spooner, a roommate. In addition, she found a job at McDonald's and made many new friends. However, less than 3 months after moving to Hawaii, Nancy suffered a terrible tragedy. On the afternoon of January 7th, 1972, her roommate, Jody Spooner, found her dead on the floor. Initially, Jody thought she had taken her own life, so Jody called the police. Soon after, the police arrived at the scene, and they determined that it was a homicide. Nancy had been brutally stabbed 63 times, including one fatal stab wound to the heart that killed her. The investigation began with the questioning of Nancy's roommate, Jody. She stated that at about 2:30 p.m., she returned home and found Nancy in the apartment with 2 men, selling knives after about 10 minutes. The 2 men left and she went into the bedroom to take a nap. She was awakened by a loud scream at about 4:15 p.m., but she dismissed it as nothing important and continued sleeping, thinking Nancy had gone out to work. At about 5:15 p.m., she heard the sound of running water in Nancy's bathroom. When she entered Nancy's room, she was horrified to find Nancy lying on the floor dead. Nancy's body had multiple stab wounds to her neck, chest and abdomen. Blood was on the floor on the bed and in the bathroom. Nancy's towels were also stained with blood. Jody said she did not hear any sounds from the attack due to the constant running water in Nancy's bathroom. Investigators began looking into several individuals, including 2 men who had come to Nancy's apartment to sell knives, and a man she had dated, however. They all have alibis, and they also passed the polygraph test, with no more clues to investigate. The police eventually moved on to other cases, and Nancy's case was gradually forgotten. However, her siblings were always determined to pursue justice. They have been yearning for answers about her mysterious death for decades. Nancy's brother Jack shared that she was an indispensable part of the family, and her departure left an unfillable void in their hearts and lives. Despite years of investigation, the case has not yet reached a clear conclusion, and no official suspect has been identified. The police have not found any concrete evidence to charge anyone, making the case one of the unsolved cases. It was not until 2001 that new leads emerged, thanks to DNA testing and advances in forensic science, including the reanalysis of evidence. Detectives reviewed the evidence and submitted fingerprints from the scene to the Automated Identification System, AFS, but no matches were found. However, DNA testing was later performed on the evidence containing blood. DNA analysis of Nancy's bloodstain, towel, and other evidence revealed a male's DNA, but the identity of the man was unknown at the time. More importantly, the DNA suggested that the suspect may have been injured during the attack on Nancy, despite investigations into her ex-boyfriend and people living in the area, but could not determine who was involved in the incident. The investigation continued for years, but the case remained largely unsolved. It wasn't until 2019 that Nancy's sister, Sampson, convinced the Honolulu police chief to reopen the case at a family gathering. After discussing a promising investigative technique called genetic genealogy, Jack searched online for experts in the field. He learned about C.C. Moore, a renowned forensic genealogist at Parabon Nano Labs in Virginia, who had helped solve dozens of cases by that point. When he asked her for help, she immediately agreed to take on Nancy's unfinished case. Moore began analyzing DNA evidence found at the crime scene. The killer appeared to have injured himself while attacking Nancy, and his blood was found on the towel. Moore compared the DNA profile provided by the police with data in a genealogy database, building a family tree of people whose DNA matched the suspect. She narrowed the search to an individual who lived near Nancy. In the early 1970s, Sharila, a college teaching assistant living in Waikiki. Moore also discovered from the records that he had a criminal record, including an arrest for kidnapping his girlfriend. When she tried to break up with him after getting a tip about tutor Chirilla, investigators tracked him down in Reno, Nevada, where he had served as a deputy state attorney general. In April 2nd, 022, they obtained a sample from his son, John, in Newport Beach, California, using modern DNA analysis technology. Combined with traditional investigative methods, they determined that John was the biological son of the person who left the DNA sample at the crime scene. This made Chirilla the prime suspect. The investigation also revealed that Chirilla lived near Nancy's apartment. At the time of the crime, on Tuesday, September 6, 2022, Reno police searched tutor Chirilla's apartment in Reno and collected his DNA. 2 days later, he tried to end his life but was unsuccessful. Then he was in custody at the county jail in Reno. A day later, on Wednesday, Chirilla made his first appearance in the Reno courthouse. In a wheelchair, looking frail and unkempt for his first extradition hearing. He is facing extradition to Hawaii after his DNA was linked to Nancy's murder. But he is no ordinary murder suspect. A former deputy attorney general and Supreme Court nominee, he has indicated he is willing to defend himself and fight extradition. He was asked if he objected to extradition to Hawaii. He told the court he wanted to stay in the Reno area to attend a social services appointment he had scheduled for next week. He argued that the DNA used to link him to the Nancy case was obtained under duress. He also testified that he was still recovering from eye surgery when police arrived at his apartment on September 6th with a warrant to collect his DNA. Reno Judge Scott Pearson told Chirilla that any legal disputes over his arrest must be resolved in Hawaii, where the trial will take place. The court set a deadline for Chirilla to make a decision. He is scheduled for another hearing on October 3rd. He remains in custody at the Washoe County Jail without bail. On October 3rd, 2022, tutor Chirilla appeared in court in Reno, Nevada, to address his extradition from Nevada to Hawaii to face a second-degree murder charge. The hearing focused on procedural issues, including Chirilla's objections to the extradition process and related legal arguments. Despite his objections, the court decided to proceed with the extradition. He was charged with Nancy's murder and was transferred to Hawaii for trial. However, on December 25th, 2023, Christmas Day, he died in the hospital after refusing to eat, drink, or take medication for 2 days. Nancy's case was solved after more than 50 years, thanks to modern DNA testing technology, although Chirilla was never convicted. Nancy's siblings viewed his death in prison as punishment for the crimes he had committed. Justice had been served for her. Welcome back to our channel. Today we explore a new case, a double crime that shocked the public due to the extreme brutality of the perpetrator. In Cape Coral, Florida, in October 2nd, 019, Wade Wilson took the lives of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz in a series of violent acts that left the community in disbelief. His violent tendencies and lack of remorse during and after the murders made him the subject of attention from both the media and the public. Wade Stephen Wilson, born on May 21st, 994 in Florida, grew up in Tallahassee. He had a troubled childhood, marked by legal problems and substance abuse. His violent behavior escalated over the years, including previous convictions for burglary, assault, and 1 count of malicious wounding. On October 7th, Christine Melton, 35, was found dead in her home, her body wrapped in a rug. That same day, Diane Ruiz, 43, was reported missing after leaving work. After a 3-day search, Diane's body was discovered in a deserted area on October 10th, indicating that she had been brutally murdered. Several witnesses confirmed seeing Wilson with both victims. Around the time of their deaths, police also found DNA at both crime scenes, which quickly allied them to identify Wilson as the prime suspect. Wilson was arrested while driving Christine's car and carrying valuables belonging to the victims. In November 2nd, 019, a grand jury formally indicted Wilson on 2 counts of first-degree murder assault, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and related charges. Shortly after receiving the new charges, Wilson responded saying, "I did not commit those murders and I am innocent." While in prison, Wilson continued to communicate with news stations, claiming he had been involved in a high-level human trafficking ring and that he would groom women for them. However, when he tried to leave that organization last year, the group framed him for the murders as punishment. While awaiting trial for the murders, Wilson had several tattoos on his face, including multiple stitches and 2 swastikas. In October 2nd, 020, Wade and fellow inmate Joseph Katz attempted to escape, but were apprehended by authorities. This resulted in 2 new charges of attempted escape and criminal damage to property being added to Wilson's record. Sometime later, in 2022, Wilson's trial began, revealing shocking information about the double murder case. Following a deposition, Wilson pleaded not guilty to the murders. However, his father, Stephen Testaseca, was called to testify in the case. Here he confirmed that Wilson had admitted every horrifying detail regarding the murder to him. In a phone call on the evening of the crime, Wilson called him 3 times. Stephen said he needed to know what was going on. Wilson told everything in detail. Stephen recounted that during the phone call, Wilson said he had gone to a bar, met a girl and gone home with her. They hung out for a while, went to sleep, and then he got on top of her and strangled her until she died. Wilson stayed in the house all night, then took her body and rolled it up in a rug. He tried to get her into her car, but she was too heavy, so he left the scene. Wilson left in the victim's car. A few hours later, he told Stephen that he was driving down the road and saw a woman walking. He stopped to ask for directions, and she got into the car. While driving, he reached over and strangled her. Wilson thought she was dead and drove into the woods to bury her. But when he pulled the girl out of the car, he realized she was still alive. He told Stephen that he got back in the car and ran her over multiple times, like spaghetti. Then he got out and took her into the woods. Wilson's father also stated that Wilson had been in prison once and was a drug addict. There was also a witness, Mila Montanus, Wilson's ex-girlfriend, who said that a few days before the incident, she had also been attacked and dragged by him. Luckily, there were many people around at the time. The trial was filled with shocking testimony and evidence that condemned Wilson's actions toward Diane and Christine. Sarah Miller from the state attorney's office said, "This is a man who has no respect for women, no respect for life." Wilson showed no reaction as the victim's family cried on the stand during Wade Wilson's defense at trial. His legal team requested expert testimony to argue that his mental state had been significantly affected by past trauma and substance abuse. Dr. Hyman Eisenstein, a forensic neuropsychologist, argued that Wilson's cognitive impairments could have stemmed from brain injuries from sports-related incidents when he was younger and a car accident when he was an adult. According to Dr. Eisenstein, these injuries impaired Wilson's executive function, which is critical for decision-making and self-control. As a result, Wilson's ability to function as a healthy person was limited, and his substance abuse exacerbated the negative effects. In addition, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Mark Mills said Wilson suffered from some type of psychosis, based on Eisenstein's interview and testing. Wilson's tests came back invalid because he exaggerated his symptoms. Mills said Wilson was suffering from paranoid delusions that could indicate schizophrenia, although he did not exhibit signs of delusions or hallucinations. When speaking with experts, in contrast, the prosecution's opposing expert, Dr. Michael Herkoff, a forensic psychologist, disagreed with the defense's conclusion. Herkoff argued that there was insufficient evidence to support a diagnosis of psychosis. Instead, he attributed Wilson's paranoid tendencies and repeated offenses to his well-documented substance abuse, arguing that this was a more plausible explanation for his actions. At his trial in early 2024, prosecutors presented forensic evidence and witness testimony. Despite the defense's efforts to counter the evidence against him was overwhelming. He eventually admitted to killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz and detailed the events of the case. He said he had no remorse, even stating coldly that he would do it again. Wilson appeared smug and smirked as his crimes were presented to the jury. On June 12, 2024, at the first sentencing hearing, Wilson was found guilty on all 6 counts of assault, motor vehicle theft, first-degree petty theft, home invasion, and the first-degree murders of Christine and Diane. After 13 days of discussion and agreement, the jury found Wilson guilty of both counts of first-degree murder and recommended that he be sentenced to death. Wilson's sentencing is scheduled for August 27, 2024 on schedule at the final sentencing hearing. Wilson was sentenced to death for the murders of Melton and Ruiz. He appeared to show no emotion in court when he learned that he would be executed. When the verdict was read, Wilson's legal team immediately filed an appeal for the death penalty. A few days later, Wilson was transferred from the Lee County Jail in Fort Myers to the Federal Correctional Facility in Rayford to await execution. The Wade Wilson case was a complex legal affair, marked by brutal crimes and a lengthy legal process. After being convicted of multiple crimes, including the murders of Melton and Ruiz, Wilson was sentenced to death. His reaction at his sentencing hearing was one of apparent indifference. He showed no emotion when informed of his fate. He is currently in prison awaiting execution. I hopefully that he will soon pay for the evil he has done to 2 innocent victims. Welcome to our channel today. We will learn about a new case in which a dentist is accused of poisoning his wife with cyanide and tetrahydrozoline in the case of Angela Craig. Angela Craig was born on April 15, 1979 in Dodge City, Kansas. She married James Tolliver Craig on December 18, 1999. They have been married for 23 years and have 6 children. Craig was a dentist at Summerbrook Dental Group in Aurora. On the surface, the family seemed happy, but in the years before Angela's death, their relationship was troubled, along with financial pressures. In March 2, 2020, Angela began experiencing severe symptoms such as dizziness, tremors, nausea, and eventually loss of consciousness. Despite being hospitalized 3 times on March 6th, 9 and 15 doctors were still unable to find the cause of her illness. Angela's condition rapidly deteriorated, requiring the use of a life support machine. On March 15th, Angela was admitted to the hospital for the last time, and on March 18th, she was declared brain dead and died shortly thereafter. The autopsy results showed that blood concentrations of tetrahydrozoline between 1 and 2.5 mcg per milliliter can cause coma or stupor, and death occurs when exceeding 2.5 mcg per milliliter. The concentration in Angela's body was recorded as 1.7 mcg per milliliter. The report also indicated that ingestion of tetrahydrozoline can cause symptoms such as hypothermia, slow heart rate, low blood pressure, and irregular breathing. In addition, arsenic poisoning was identified as a serious condition, directly related to Angela's death. In addition, the autopsy results found that her body had enough cyanide and tetrahydrozoline concentrations to cause death. So her death was ruled a homicide. Angela's sudden death left everyone around her shocked and wondering about the reason for her serious health decline and sudden departure. Angela's family expressed concern about Craig's past behavior and conduct, mentioning past incidents that showed signs of control or manipulation. They suspected he was involved in Angela's death, which prompted the authorities to open an official investigation into. When the police began investigating Angela's husband, Craig, they discovered that Craig had used the office computer to look up information such as how many grams of pure arsenic can kill. Is arsenic detected in an autopsy? 5 types of poison that cannot be detected and how to make poison. He also purchased semi-crystalline arsenic from Amazon a few weeks before Angela died. Besides, investigators also discovered that before Angela's first hospitalization, Craig had prepared a protein shake for her before her workout. After the workout, she felt dizzy, shaky, and fatigued, so Craig took her to the hospital. However, doctors initially had difficulty determining the cause. On March 9th, when Angela was hospitalized for the second time, Craig ordered potassium cyanide from a company in Nebraska. In an email to the company's customer service representative, Craig introduced himself as a surgeon and said he planned to use potassium cyanide to research a medical method. Craig's business partner, upon learning that Angela's condition had worsened, went to the hospital and told a nurse that he believed Angela might have been poisoned. He also mentioned that Craig had recently ordered potassium cyanide for their dental practice. In addition, a manager at Craig's workplace reported that on March 13th, Craig received a package at the office. When the manager opened the package, they found a warning label about biological waste and a round container with the words potassium cyanide inside. The manager did a Google search and found that Angela's symptoms were consistent with potassium cyanide poisoning. Then, on March 15, when the manager learned that Angela had been hospitalized again, she shared information about the package with another employee. Evidence against Craig included his internet search history, which showed he had researched poisons and how to make a murder look like a heart attack. Investigators alleged Craig purchased cyanide and arsenic online, and surveillance footage showed him handling items related to the poisoning. They believe that between March 6th and March 15th, 2023, Craig secretly poisoned his wife Angela with cyanide and tetrahydrozoline, an ingredient commonly found in eye drops. Additionally, Craig allegedly had an affair with Kane during this time, which prosecutors believe may have been his motive. While his wife was dying in the hospital, he flew his lover Kane to Denver. All of these actions, along with medical evidence that Angela was poisoned, led to Craig's arrest on Sunday, March 19, 2023, in Aurora, Colorado. He remains in custody while the case is pending. with charges that his intentional poisoning was the cause of Angela's death. Craig made his first court appearance on Wednesday, July 12, 2023. The hearing focused on the proceedings regarding the charges and his custody status. Craig is charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Angela. Prosecutors presented evidence that Craig planned to murder his wife. He allegedly poisoned she by adding cyanide and tetrahydrozoline to her protein shake. He had searched for information about poisons on the internet and had attempted to purchase arsenic and cyanide online. Prosecutors allege Craig conducted these searches and planned the murders shortly after he began an extramarital affair. The judge decided to hold Craig without bail. Based on the seriousness of the crime, Craig is suspected of attempted murder, flight risk, and may be dangerous to others. The Arapahoe County medical examiner testified that Angela died from cyanide and tetrahydrozoline poisoning, a substance commonly found in over-the-counter eye drops. An Aurora Police Department detective also testified, providing home surveillance video that showed Craig holding bottles of drinks his wife frequently consumed, and at one point holding a syringe. However, the defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial, pointing out that surveillance video did not show the poisoning. Craig's attorneys denied that he poisoned his wife's protein shake. However, Judge Shea Whitaker concluded that there was enough evidence to go to trial. Craig then attempts to make Angela's murder appear as if she ended her own life. He enlisting a former convict to plant false evidence. According to Aurora police, Craig wrote a letter from prison to a recently released former inmate with the intention of persuading him to testify falsely. Specifically, Craig asked the person to send fake suicide notes to Angela's family home, while Craig himself would write the letters from prison. Craig even offered to treat the inmate's mother's teeth for free. In exchange for help, however, the letter Craig sent never reached the ex-convict. It was returned because Craig forgot to include the former prisoner's apartment number in the recipient's address. A prison technician later retrieved it, opened it, and read the contents of the letter. So Craig faces charges of first-degree murder, destruction of evidence, premeditated murder, and solicitation of false testimony in connection with his premeditated letter. Plus, police told the court that Craig also planned to find attractive women to falsely testify that they had had affairs with him. These relationships were staged as a reason for Angela to suffer mental trauma, and she ended her own life after discovering her husband's infidelity. Craig's attorney, Harvey Steinberg, abruptly withdrew from the case on Thursday, November 21, 2024, the same day the trial was scheduled to begin, citing professional conflicts and other reasons. As a result, Craig's trial was postponed and rescheduled for December 16, 2024. Craig now faces two new charges: solicitation of first-degree murder and solicitation of first-degree perjury. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Munchie Ji. In 2012, Munchie Ji, a Chinese citizen, enrolled at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, where she earned a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. One of her professors was impressed by her expertise and offered her a job at biomaterials company. While working there, Minchie met her future husband, Joe Elledge, in September 2, 2015, as he was pursuing his engineering studies. They both worked at the same company where Minchie was Joe's boss. Their feelings for each other grew quickly, and just a year and 7 months after their first meeting, Joe proposed to Minchie on September 22, 2017, on a trail at Rockbridge Memorial State Park, called the Devil's Refrigerator. They got married only 2 weeks later. Munchie's parents think they rushed into marriage due to the impending expiration of Munchie's visa. They felt that American citizens couldn't fully grasp the difficulty that immigrants face. Although Munchie is financially independent, but she still has difficulty obtaining citizenship. After nearly 5 months, Munchie received a promotion at work. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Minchie and Joe decided that she should decline the promotion and leave her job to focus entirely on motherhood. Even though she was the primary breadwinner for their family, at that time, their income decreased significantly, but it was sufficient for their essential needs. In October 2, 2018, Joe and Munchie's family gave birth to their first daughter. However, after her birth, Munchie and Joe began to face difficulties. Although their marriage appeared normal to outsiders, only Munchie's parents were aware of the reality. After quitting her job, Munchie felt completely isolated. She doesn't communicate with anyone, Her small child became her only companion, along with daily phone calls from her mother. Traditionally, Menchi's parents had to travel from China to the United States before she gave birth to help care for and support her. They lived in a separate house nearby and visited Menchi daily, but their appearance increased tension between Menchi and her husband, Joe. On October 9th, 2019, a year after Menchi's daughter was born, Menchi's parents were alarmed when they didn't receive a call from her, unable to reach her. They sent a family friend who lived close by to check on Menchi. When the friend arrived, Joe answered the door and revealed that Menchi was missing. He shared a troubling account. On the evening of October 8th, he had tried to give Menchi a massage and flirt with her, but she rejected him, saying she needed sleep because she had important plans for the next day. Joe stated that he woke up the next morning to find Menchi gone. She had left behind her car keys, mobile phone wallet, and most importantly, did not take their daughter with her. Despite her absence, Joe did not immediately report her missing, believing she was simply out for a walk and would return. A family friend attempted to call Menchi but was unsuccessful. Eventually, under pressure, Joe reported her disappearance to the police. But rather than calling 911, he reached out to the non-emergency number 311 ##. Menchi's parents were unaware of this and were convinced the police were actively searching for their daughter. On October 15th, 2019, a week after Menchi went missing, her husband, Joe alleged, reported her disappearance to the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. He recounted to detectives the same information he had shared with a family friend. Joe described Menchi as appearing stressed the night before she went missing. He mentioned that she went to bed after telling him she had important matters to attend to. The next morning, when he asked her 3 times who she was meeting, she did not provide clear answers. He suspected she might be having an affair and secretly meeting another man. Later that day, Joe informed investigators that he had discovered notes on Menchi's computer discussing an affair. Joe said Menchi texted a man from China. The message ended with her expressing sadness that her husband was not interested in her. Joe speculated that Menchi might have left him for this man, potentially abandoning their daughter for a new life. He expressed his love for their daughter and his desire for Menchi to return home safely. From the outset, investigators were skeptical of Joe's account and considered him a suspect. Joe's family hired a lawyer who revealed that Menchi and the man China with had intimate and emotional conversations via text messages. The main question is whether Menchi went to see the man, who lives in China and where she is now. The police found out that Joe, upon realizing his wife was missing, did not call 911, but instead contacted 311. This made them even more suspicious of him. He willingly returned to the Columbia Police Department for further questioning. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious of his account, particularly when Joe mentioned taking long drives to find new walking spots instead of searching for his missing wife. Additionally, it was noted that Joe closed the door before leaving their apartment. It seemed like Joe didn't care how Menchi got home, especially since her phone keys were left behind. Menchi didn't drive the car. Detectives had suspicions, but they found no evidence to prove Joe was involved in his wife's disappearance. No blood weapon, witnesses, or body. Furthermore, there was no indication that Menchi ran away to meet another man in China. They also confirmed that Menchi had not booked any flights. From the start, it was clear that Menchi would never have abandoned her beloved daughter. Menchi's parents refused to accept this hypothesis and insisted that she was a loving mother. When detectives spoke with Joe, they asked for his phone number, which he willingly provided. Inside his phone, investigators discovered something alarming. Over 10 hours of secretly recorded conversations with his wife, in which Joe expressed his dissatisfaction with their marriage and his desire for a divorce. He also discussed plans to send his wife back to China. However, this discovery was minor compared to the nearly 4 and 2 hours of recordings found on Menchi's phone. In these conversations, the true nature of Joe emerged. He threatened his wife, referred to himself as God, and demanded that her parents stay away from their home. It was chilling. The Joe family's issues started a few weeks before Menchi gave birth. Her parents traveled from China to support their daughter, following a tradition where grandparents help with the baby for 100 days. This custom bothered Joe immensely, as he had a strong dislike for Menchi's parents. What really angered Joe was that Menchi tried to fight him back, and she said that she needed her parents. She loved them very much and needed their help taking care of the newborn. When Menchi had just given birth, the relationship between her and her husband became very tense, and they argued a lot. Menchi's mother mentioned that Joe disliked it when Menchi spoke Chinese around him because he barely understood the language. Joe interpreted everything they said as hurtful and negative towards him. Eventually, when Menchie's father could no longer tolerate the situation and returned to China, Joe felt relieved in seeing it as his personal victory. Now he only had to manage his mother-in-law and reassert his authority in the home. Menchie's mother made Chinese dumplings for Joe's birthday, but he didn't like the way she used the cutting board. This sparked a heated argument between Joe and her. Joe angrily demanded that she leave his house for good. Menchie's mother, who believed in maintaining harmony because of her Confucian values, chose not to confront Joe and did not defend herself against his harsh words. Menchie pleaded with Joe to allow her mother to stay, because she needed her mother's support. But Joe only replied with insults and foul language. Joe told Menchie was incompetent solely because she was a woman. Joe attempted to manipulate and control her. He even threatened Menchie's mother, claiming he would harm her. This left Menchie's mother in shock. She didn't understand why Joe was so angry with both her and Menchie. Feeling helpless, Menchie sought help from Joe's mother, who quickly lost her temper and drove 2 hours to address the family conflict. However, even with his mother present, Joe couldn't hide his disdain for his mother-in-law. He demanded that she kneel and bow to him. Although Joe eventually apologized to her, he still insisted that she leave before the 100-day mark. Consequently, Menchie's mother returned to China. In October 2nd, 019 Menchie disappeared. Detectives believed that serious family conflict made her feel trapped, especially regarding her immigration status. Just 5 months prior, she had to attend another interview to apply for citizenship. 2 weeks after Menchie's disappearance, the Columbia Police Department opened a criminal investigation into the case on the same day, 16 days after she went missing. Police arrested Joe Elledge on suspicion of child abuse. Joe confessed to physically abusing his 1-year-old daughter, claiming it was a form of discipline. Before Menchie went missing, she told her mother that she had seen bruises on her daughter and suspected Joe was the cause. Her mother advised her to report Joe to the police, but when she never had the opportunity to do so, Joe's lawyer claimed this was merely an attempt to get Joe imprisoned. He argued that Joe made a mistake, emphasizing that he is a young single father who might have erred. Joe was released on bail, while his mother assisted him and cared for her granddaughter. Meanwhile, detectives continued to gather evidence against Joe, convinced that he was involved in Menchie's disappearance. On October 25, 2019, police obtained a search warrant and entered the apartment. Joe had been missing for just over 2 weeks. During the search, they collected Menchie's backpack and notes that Joe had written to help himself prepare for questions from reporters and investigators. Detectives thoroughly searched the apartment for any evidence, and following the hunch, they also took a pair of dirty boots for examination, but they found nothing significant. On the same day, Joe Elledge was arrested on suspicion of child abuse, after fresh bruises were discovered on the girl's body. Meanwhile, the search for Menchie has become a search for her remains, because no one believes she is still alive. Detectives carefully tracked all movements of Joe's car and phone. However, every lead they followed led to dead ends in this complex case. As a result, the detective made the decision to charge Joe Elledge with first-degree murder, even without a body. These charges were filed while Joe was still in jail on child abuse allegations. Meanwhile, detectives continued their efforts to locate Menchie. Phone records indicated that Joe was away for 30 minutes on the day he reported her missing, a fact he did not share with investigators. When the detectives searched that location, they found nothing after months of searching. The police were still unable to find Menchie. Her mother traveled to the United States to help with the search, convinced that her daughter's body was nearby. Over the following months, the police conducted regular searches in the area, and Menchie's mother held a memorial by the river. A year later, while Joe was still awaiting his trial, a tourist was walking in the park where Joe had proposed to Menchie. He noticed something shiny in the mud and discovered it was a wallet. Upon closer inspection, he saw a pair of shoes and then what looked like a human skull. He immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the remains were those of Menchie. Her parents learned that their daughter had died, but the circumstances surrounding her death were still unclear. Much time had passed, and even forensic experts could not determine the cause of death. They found unnatural damage to her bones, including 4 broken ribs, indicating she had suffered a strong blow to the back. Detectives began to piece together a theory about what happened to Menchie, focusing on the evidence collected after her disappearance. They noted that Joe's cell phone records indicated he was near the location where Menchie was found on the day he reported her missing. On the day Menchie disappeared, it had been raining, Key evidence included Joe's dirty boots. The dirt and gravel on the soles, along with foliage, were sent to the Missouri Botanical Garden for analysis. The lab carefully removed juniper tree needles from the boots for DNA testing. A lab worker then climbed nearby juniper trees, numbered each, and collected fresh needles from the highest branches. These samples were preserved and compared with the needles found on Joe's shoes, revealing a DNA match. On November 1st, 2021, Joe alleges trial for the murder of his wife, Munchie, began with compelling evidence that Joe was present at the scene where Minchie's body was discovered on the day she went missing, including DNA from the trees and geolocation data. However, his lawyer presented a new narrative. The lawyer claimed that Joe did kill his wife, but insisted it was a tragic accident. Due to evidence from the juniper tree and its DNA, Joe could no longer assert that Ming-Chi had run away. He had to confess that he buried her in a shallow grave. Joe stated that he was aware of his wife's communication with a man from China, and they had an argument that night. Feeling upset and hurt, he wanted to take their daughter for a walk when she rushed towards him, intending to take the child. But Joe pushed her away. She fell against the table, injured her ribs, and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she went to bed. In the morning, when the child started crying, Mungchi did not wake up. Joe then realized she had passed away in her sleep. He claimed that his wife had attacked him first, and that he was only defending himself, asserting it was self-defense. However, this explanation seemed highly questionable. Joe was twice the size of his wife, making it unlikely that she could have attacked him. And after sustaining such a severe injury, she would not have been able to get up and walk to the bed. The prosecutor argued that the evidence, particularly the 4 broken ribs, suggested Joe's account was fabricated. This injury indicated she had suffered a brutal beating. The prosecutor alleged that it was premeditated murder, driven by months of escalating anger. Joe harbored hatred for his wife. In court, the prosecutor presented secret audio recordings between the couple to reveal the true dynamics of their relationship. These recordings helped clarify the motive behind the crime. No evidence of Minchie communicating with other men was ever found. On November 11th, 2021, after nearly 7 hours of discussion, the jury reached a verdict. They found Joe Elige guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Mungchi and Joe's daughter currently lives with Joe's mother, but Mungchi's parents are pursuing joint custody of their 4-year-old granddaughter. Joe's lawyer argues that, while the child will always have a relationship with her Chinese grandparents, she should stay in the care of Joe's mother for her safety. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Krausnack. On February 19, 1982, police were called to the Krausnack family home, where they discovered the body of 29-year-old Kathy Krausnack. An axe was found embedded in her head, the only fatal wound. Earlier, Kathy's 30-year-old husband, James Krausnack, had run into a neighbor's house while holding their 3-year-old daughter. He was covered in blood and appeared distressed, reporting that his wife showed no signs of life. While crying and agitated, he waited for police to arrive. James told police that he had left for work at Kodak around 6 a.m., where he worked as an economist. He spent the day completing routine tasks, while his wife, Kathy, and their daughter Sarah were still asleep at home. Kathy had planned to spend the day with their daughter. When James returned home around 5 p.m., he noticed the garage door open, the kitchen window broken, and the glass door between the garage and the house shattered. Realizing something was wrong, he went inside and found his wife lying on the bed. He was shocked and momentarily unable to speak. He then noticed his 3-year-old daughter lying next to the bed, unharmed. To ensure her safety, James took his daughter to a neighbor's house. The neighbor opened the door and saw James, who was frightened and crying. At his request, she called 911, asking them to come quickly because he claimed there had been a murder. Police spoke to Sarah, who seemed unaware of what had happened. She said she saw a multicolored bad guy on her parents' bed and saw her mother with blood on her face. It is extremely distressing for a child to be left alone in an apartment with a murdered mother for an entire day. This was a disturbing aspect of the case. Fortunately, Sarah was too young to fully understand the situation, so it did not affect her mental state much. The neighbors did not observe or hear anything unusual. The police investigated the crime scene, but did not find any significant evidence or clues. The murder weapon, an axe, was taken from Kathy's family garage. It had been used to cut the grass. Notably, there were no fingerprints on the axe, suggesting that it had been deliberately cleaned. In addition, forensic experts found no fingerprints inside the house, which was puzzling, since 3 people lived there and could have touched many objects. The police found this strange and assumed that the perpetrator had cleaned the entire house. However, the police did notice something strange in the kitchen. A damp bathroom rug was drying in the garage. James claimed that he had no idea why the rug was there, and that nothing of note had been found on it. In 1982, forensic techniques did not allow for the collection or analysis of DNA. Police suspected that the incident was a botched robbery, theorizing that the attackers may have become frightened and decided to eliminate Kathy, a potential witness. However, some valuables were still intact. Kathy's bag, which had been left in the kitchen, had been emptied onto the floor, but the contents, money, jewelry, and expensive tea sets were all there and neatly arranged. This raised an important question. Why did the criminals leave these items behind? Even the cash that was openly left on the dresser had not been taken. Perhaps the criminal had scared Kathy. But in this case, fingerprints would have been left on these items, yet there were none, which was puzzling. This behavior was unusual, and the police noticed these discrepancies, raising suspicions that the crime scene had been staged. Some items were arranged in a way that suggested they were deliberately placed there. A crucial reason for dismissing robbery as a motive was that nothing had been stolen. Seasoned police officers who regularly dealt with burglaries immediately recognized that this incident was different. While murders were rare in Brighton, deaths and robberies occurred almost daily. Police believed that Kathy's death was a premeditated murder. The initial suspect was, of course, her husband, who discovered her body. Police began investigating James. James's friends and acquaintances described them as a happy, even idealistic couple. They had both grown up in the same Michigan city. Kathy came from a family of truck drivers, while James's parents owned a successful carpet store. They met in high school and began dating in college, eventually marrying on May 3, 1974. After their marriage, Kathy continued her studies in economics in Colorado, and in 1978, they celebrated the birth of their daughter, Sarah. Meanwhile, James became interested in further education and pursued a doctorate in economics. James then took a teaching position at the University of Lynchburg in Virginia. In 1981, the family relocated to Brighton, New York, where James found a job as an economist. Kathy was a devoted and caring mother to their daughter, always attentive and loving. However, friends noticed a significant change in Kathy's mood 6 months before her death. She became unusually irritable and restless, though they did not know the reasons behind her behavior. As the police investigated the family situation, they discovered that things were not as perfect as they initially appeared. The couple kept their problems private, never discussing their issues publicly or seeking advice from others, which made it difficult to gather information. However, police found a brochure for marriage counseling in the family car, suggesting that there had been ongoing discord in their relationship. The police also contacted James's employer and learned that he had misrepresented his qualifications, claiming to have a doctorate. This deception led to him being assigned a role he was unqualified for, resulting in stress at work and further complicating his situation. James's cooperation helped the police gather information, and James agreed to attend the next meeting for questioning. But he did not attend. Less than 24 hours after the murder, he left the city without informing the police. This action of his made the police suspicious. He was intentionally fleeing. Police later discovered that James had gone to his parents' home in Michigan. They found him again and questioned him. He cooperated with the police by providing blood and hair samples for analysis. Unfortunately, DNA testing was not available at the time, so this did not yield any useful results. 10 days after Kathy was found dead in her bed, James hired a lawyer. The police did not have enough evidence to bring any charges. In 1982, police focused on information that James had left for work at 6 a.m. It was important to verify this detail and determine whether he could have been home at the time of the murder. Forensic examinations showed that Kathy had died in her sleep between 4:30 and 7 a.m., meaning she could have been murdered with an axe shortly after James left for work. While it was possible that the husband had committed the crime before leaving, it was difficult to understand why he would do so and then go to work, leaving their 3-year-old daughter behind. The mother's body remained in the house throughout the day. The investigation stalled. The evidence collected and the documents found did not shed light on the events of that morning. The James had no clear motive, making a jury trial unlikely. If the prosecution lost, they would not be able to bring new charges against him. In 1997, James met his old friend Sharon at a trade show. Their relationship quickly blossomed, and James asked her out, which she accepted. Sharon noticed that James was still deeply affected by his past loss. He seemed shocked by the traumatic event. James shared the basics of that terrible day with Sharon, but avoided going into detail, and Sharon did not want to press him for more information. Their mutual understanding helped strengthen their relationship. and they later married. In 1999, they moved to another city, then moved across the country. At the same time, police continued their efforts on Kathy's case. New police re-examined the evidence, leading to the analysis of a large number of items related to the case. The police were committed to finding justice for the woman, who had been so brutally murdered. In 2015, the FBI assisted Brighton police in their investigation, which led them to focus on a suspect, Kathy's husband, James. On April 16, 2016, 34 years after the murder, police made a surprise visit to James's home, hoping to meet him and possibly uncover inconsistencies in his previous statements. However, their plan did not go as planned. James appeared calm and welcoming. He chatted with the officers, agreed to have the conversation recorded, and did not request an attorney. They talked for an hour at the kitchen table, but James remained calm throughout the conversation. Eventually, one of the police asked him directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. James was angry, said that he would never hurt his wife. Sharon defended him, saying that in all the time they were together, she had never witnessed any aggressive behavior from him. He was a caring and loving husband who would never lay a hand on her. She firmly believed that he was incapable of such cruelty. Sharon also participated in the police interrogation. Throughout the interrogation, she never doubted her husband's innocence. She felt that she had seen his sincere heart and kind nature over the years. Although her views seemed naive, she held these beliefs deeply. She never asked about the fate of James' ex-wife, as she was satisfied with the brief explanation he gave at the beginning of their relationship and never mentioned it again. Police found themselves at a dead end once again, prompting the decision to review all the evidence collected for DNA testing nearly 40 years after the crime. The murder weapon, an axe found in the victim's head, was sent to the FBI for analysis. Unfortunately, they were unable to locate any usable DNA on it because it had been tampered with. This was a significant setback. The police then sought to determine when the crime had occurred. One of the United States' leading forensic experts, Michael Budden, analyzed all the available information about the body. He concluded that the woman had likely died around 3 a.m. based on her body temperature and the amount of undigested food in her stomach. Therefore, when James arrived at work at 6 a.m., he would have definitely noticed that something was wrong. Police were skeptical of the idea of a botched robbery because nothing was taken. They questioned why the robbers would kill a woman who was sleeping and did not witness the robbery. This conflict led to the filing of murder charges on November 8th. 2019, James was arrested after being charged, but the 67-year-old did not confess to the crime. Police used the time of death to investigate a murder that had occurred 40 years earlier. They found evidence that a robbery had been staged. With this information, law enforcement and James presented their case to the jury, focusing on James' alleged involvement in the murder of Kathy Krausnack, his first wife. During the police, investigators discovered a dangerous criminal named Edla Rabbi, who lived about a mile in the Hat from Kathy's home in 1982. Rabbi was notorious for his harmful taste in women. Despite being arrested several times, Rabbi often received light sentences and served a total of more than 32 years in prison. Before his death in 2014, he confessed to killing Kathy, but gave many inaccurate details, leading to skepticism about his claims. After each time in custody, he hunted for new victims, torturing them. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1991, when he strangled a 27-year-old woman named Stephanie Kupczynski. Although he confessed to the crime in 2012, he maintained that he had no intention of killing her, and that the situation had spiraled out of control. Shortly before Kathy's murder, Rabbi had been released from prison in the 1980s. He was questioned, and the investigation began, but was not considered a likely suspect. Police questioned him briefly and then released him. As a result, James's lawyers claimed the police were negligent. Instead of pursuing the real killer, they chose to blame the grieving husband James, who they considered the prime suspect. This situation had a significant impact on society. It was revealed that not only was the criminal dead by the time the case was revisited, but the police who investigated it in the 1980s were also deceased, meaning they could not be held accountable for any mistakes. During the original police, the police had only spoken to the murderer once, and then disregarded him entirely. Since Edla Rabbi had passed away, he could not be questioned to clarify his role in the case. Nevertheless, many involved in the investigation still questioned whether he was connected to Kathy's murder. Although he confessed to killing Kathy before his death, numerous inconsistencies arose in his account, particularly regarding the handwriting. which did not resemble his at all. This conclusion was reached by all the experts who examined his case. First, he had a history of rape rather than robbery, yet no signs of sexual assault were found. Additionally, the murder weapon, an axe, was not typical of his methods, and the handwriting was evidently different.
As a result, police did not consider him a suspect.
Years ago, the prosecution was leaning towards the theory that Kathy's husband was her killer, rather than a nearby maniac. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the time of death as crucial evidence. However, several defense experts disagreed with the assertion that Kathy died early, with most believing it occurred before 6:30 in the morning. It is believed that Kathy died at 6 a.m. after her husband left for work. The investigation was complicated by the fact that Kathy was under an electric blanket, and it was unclear whether it was on or off at the time of her death. If it was on, the temperature it reached was unknown. Experts attempted to estimate the time of death by analyzing the drop in body temperature. Ultimately, there is no reliable method for determining the exact time of death. Experts have differed, resulting in a margin of error of several hours. Another piece of evidence cited by the police was a shoe imprint, found pressing down on a garbage bag at the crime scene. This imprint resembled the shoes worn by Kathy's husband, who was absent at the time of her death. However, this evidence alone was not enough to establish his guilt. The prosecutor argued that the husband was the only possible suspect, because he had a motive stemming from family issues. After lengthy deliberations at the hearing, the verdict was announced in court. The jury were unanimous in only one opinion: that the crime was too confusing and contradictory, and the evidence too dubious and easily dismissed. Despite this, James Krausnack was convicted of second-degree murder in November 2022 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict came as a shock to many, especially to those close to James who knew him well. They had remained certain that James was not guilty, because there was no serious evidence of his involvement. James himself also asserted his innocence. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel today. We're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949 in Lebanon, Indiana, USA, to carnival workers Lester Likens and his wife, Betty Likens, formerly Grimes. She was the third of 5 children with 2 older twins, Daniel and Diana, and 2 younger twins, Benny and Jenny. Sylvia's younger sister, Jenny, had polio, which left her with a significantly weakened leg, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Sylvia's parents had a tumultuous marriage, with constant moving and financial struggles. They worked at carnival booths throughout Indiana during the summer, selling candy beer and soft drinks to help out the Likens. Children would often travel with their parents, but Sylvia and Jenny frequently stayed with relatives, mostly their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to have a more stable education. From a young age, Sylvia took on various responsibilities, including babysitting, running errands for neighbors and friends, and completing household chores like ironing clothes. In doing so, she earned some money, which she used to buy things for herself, and occasionally shared with her mom. Those who knew her described Sylvia as a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders, and her friends affectionately called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile due to a missing front tooth, which she lost during a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia loved music, particularly the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister, Jenny, who was shy and less secure. The sisters frequently visited a local skating rink, where Sylvia would assist Jenny, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Likens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, their father arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude, Bernice, a mother of 2 girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Likens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude promised their father that she would care for the girls, as if they were her own until his return, which was expected to be just after the 4th of July celebrations. The Likens sisters, Sylvia and Jenny, moved into the Banese home at 3850 East New York Street. Their father, older brothers, and eventually, their mother went on the road with a carnival on the East Coast. As part of the arrangement, Gertrude Banese would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until their family returned in November. At first, things seemed normal at the household. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, bonding over their shared love of popular music and helping helping with household chores. The Lycan sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Bernice kids, and the pastor often commended Sylvia for her kindness and respect for sacred matters. However, when the payments for hosting the girls started coming in, late Gertrude's frustration mounted, and she began to mistreat them. This mistreatment involved physical punishments with thick objects, which eventually escalated into regular beatings, starvation, and humiliation. Sylvia faced the brunt of the abuse. Gertrude and her daughter, Paula, repeatedly accused Sylvia of engaging in inappropriate behavior with boys, which led to Gertrude physically kicking Sylvia in the groin and Paula physically attacking her. The girls were forced to eat food they disliked, and Sylvia was even beaten by Stephanie's boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard. Daily life at the Banfi residence was brutal. Violence escalated over time. Paula's attacks on Sylvia was savage, including punching her in the face and breaking her own wrist. She targeted Sylvia's mouth and eyes, then used her cast to inflict more harm. The sisters faced relentless verbal and psychological abuse, including Gertrude's cruel accusations of promiscuity and forced attacks on each other. The abuse of Sylvia didn't only come from the Banowski family. Coy Hubbard and his friends would visit Gertrude's home, tormenting Sylvia physically and verbally. Gertrude and her kids would join in inflicting harm. Neighborhood kids would beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag, and Gertrude would humiliate her, forcing her to undress and perform sexual acts for their entertainment. Gertrude expelled Sylvia from school as punishment for stealing a gym suit, which Sylvia had done because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This cruelty led to severe physical abuse, including beatings with a police belt and kicks to the genitals. Despite Stephanie's attempts to intervene, Gertrude continued to torment them, inflicting further pain by burning their fingertips with matches and whipping them. A few days later, Gertrude again employed the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she allegedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the escalating frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent, a condition for which she was denied access to the bathroom and forced to wet herself. As further punishment, on October 6, 1965, Gertrude confined Sylvia to the basement. Binding her with rope, she often kept Sylvia naked, providing her with minimal sustenance and frequently denying her water. Sylvia was consistently tied to the stair railing in the basement, her feet barely touching the ground. The Banfi family would occasionally interrupt their physical and emotional torment to watch their favorite TV shows. Neighborhood boys would even pay 5 cents each to view Sylvia's body on display, participating in her humiliation, beating, burning, and mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children restrained and silenced Sylvia, then submerged her in a bathtub of scorching hot water. Next, they rubbed salt into her injuries. After this incident, an anonymous caller, who was the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe, contacted Arsenal School to report that a girl with severe skin lesions was living at the Banvay household, since Sylvia had been absent from school for several days. A school nurse visited Gertrude's residence to investigate. Gertrude claimed to the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week, and that she was unaware of her current whereabouts. She also alleged that Sylvia's skin lesions were a result of her poor personal hygiene, and that she was a negative influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not pursue any further investigation into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Benazzi Jr. subjected Sylvia to a cruel and sadistic prank. He offered her a plate of soup, only to swiftly pull it away as she attempted to eat with her hands, which was difficult for her due to her severe malnutrition. Afterwards, Gertrude permitted Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but warned her that she must not wet the bed before going to sleep. Sylvia quietly asked Jenny for a glass of water, hoping to avoid dehydration. However, the next morning, Gertrude found that Sylvia had urinated on herself and, as a punishment, forced her to perform a humiliating and degrading act, masturbating with a glass bottle in front of the Banby children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Sylvia to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked, before proclaiming that she had branded her daughters and now she was going to brand her. Gertrude began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Sylvia's abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish etching the words into Sylvia's flesh, while she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. in what Hobbs would later insist were short light etchings. He continued to brand the text into Sylvia's abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard and 10-year-old Shirley forcibly took Sylvia to the basement. There they attempted to inflict a burn on Sylvia's body, specifically beneath her left breast, using an anchor bulb to create a mark resembling the letter S. However, due to their mistake of applying part of the loop in reverse, the resulting deep burn scar would instead look like the number 3. On that grim night after enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny that she knew Jenny didn't want her to die, but she was sure she was going to die. The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter. While dictating its contents, the plan was sinister. They intended to deceive Sylvia's parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Bonvie residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Sylvia after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them. After writing the letter, Sylvia was again tied to the basement stair railing, while Gertrude finalized her plan to abandon her in Jimmy's forest. With the help of John Jr. and Jenny, Gertrude offered Sylvia cookies, but she refused, saying, "Give them to the dog, I don't want them." Enraged, Gertrude forced the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and then she and John brutally beat her, targeting her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia's condition had deteriorated. She could hardly speak or control her movements. Gertrude brought her to the kitchen, propping her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk. However, Sylvia struggled to hold the glass, which further infuriated Gertrude, who tossed her to the floor before returning her to the basement. Soon Sylvia became delirious, repeatedly moaning and muttering incoherently. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia couldn't get past the first 4 letters and was unable to stand up from the floor. Sylvia faced neighborhood bullies in the basement. She pointed out familiar faces, shouting names after a failed attempt to bite a rotten pear. Jenny reminded her she couldn't feel her teeth, having lost one at 7, exhausted and desperate. Sylvia tried to escape but collapsed. Gertrude punished her brutally, striking her head and knocking her out. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Bonvie residence and rushed to the basement, where he found Stephanie crying and cradling Sylvia's frail, wounded body. After their mother instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia's body, she and Richard decided to give Sylvia a warm, soothing bath and dress her in fresh clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms, where she whispered her final wish for her father to be by her side or to be taken home. After suffering severe punishment and weakening from starvation, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she attempted to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude hysterically screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her own death. Initially, Gertrude struck Sylvia's lifeless body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending, in a futile attempt to rouse her. Soon overcome with panic, Gertrude instructed Richard Hobbs to call the authorities from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude escorted the officers to the bedroom, where she revealed Sylvia's brutally beaten and mutilated body, lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed over the letter that Sylvia had been coerced into writing. Gertrude claimed to have cared for the young girl for over an hour before her death, applying antiseptic to her wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. According to Gertrude, Sylvia had run away from home with a group of teenagers. Returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and clutching the note, having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, and staring out into the void. Local Detective Doug Funkhauser was on his way to celebrate his anniversary with his wife when he received the distressing call about a young girl's murder in town. Rushing to Roberts Court in Portsmouth, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. Bloodstains on the door handle caught his attention as he approached the residence inside. In the kitchen, he discovered the gruesome scene. The teenager's partially naked body sprawled on the floor. Megan lay amidst a sizable pool of blood, bearing multiple stab wounds across her back, neck, face, and throat, with her mouth sealed shut with tape. For Detective Funkhauser, a seasoned investigator, this case stood out as one of the most brutal he had ever encountered. Compounded by the fact that the victim was a young child, the thought of his own 3 children intensified his determination to bring the perpetrator to justice. Despite Megan not inviting the killer into her house, there were no signs of forced entry. However, a leaf found inside, traced back to the bush by the window, showed that the assailant had entered through the first-floor window. The attack started in an upstairs bedroom, evident from the messy bed that indicated a struggle. Her underwear was on the floor, and a tape dispenser under the left corner of the bed. matched the tape used to bind her. Bloodstained tape was collected for analysis. Police took pillows, sheets, and blankets for forensic examination. Disturbing evidence was found in the bedroom. Seminal fluid on the duvet and in Megan's underwear suggested she was sexually assaulted before the brutal attack. Downstairs, Megan had 43 stab wounds, 11. After her death, she was discovered naked from the waist down, with her arms bound behind her with tape. The forensic team quickly identified the potential murder weapon. They found a knife missing from the kitchen counter holder, eventually locating it in the sink. Megan was first attacked in her room, but escaped downstairs before being fatally assaulted. The perpetrator moved through the house, leaving footprints and washed their hands in the sink, leaving behind one of the 2 knives used in the murder. The other knife taken from the kitchen block was found in a storm drain nearby. Detectives realized they had to apprehend the murderer promptly. The investigation began swiftly, with officers thoroughly searching the area, looking for witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious during the crime. Unfortunately, no one provided any useful information, and it seemed like the culprit had fled unnoticed. The town was gripped by fear, with parents worried about their children's safety, many too scared to sleep at night. Aware that a killer was on the loose after their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris quickly told the police they suspected Robert Hickey, a friend of Chris from the Navy who had a troubled past. When Megan was 16, Robert, who also worked with Chris, sexually assaulted her. Megan started acting differently and doing poorly in school. Chris noticed and asked her what was wrong. Eventually, Megan admitted that Robert was abusing her. Chris was angered and disgusted, immediately cutting off all connections with the Hickey family and reporting the abuse. At this point, Megan's parents had initiated legal action. Just 5 months before her murder, with a trial awaiting, they now suspected that Robert had killed Megan to prevent her from testifying against him. Fearing the potential damage to his reputation and the risk of incarceration, Megan had even voiced concerns about him coming after her. And tragically, it appeared her apprehensions had materialized. Officers went to Hickey's house, looking for evidence related to a murder, but they didn't find anything incriminating. However, when they checked his computer later on, they saw that someone had tried to delete everything on the hard drive. A file that had been recently deleted was found, showing illegal pictures of underage kids. This led to Hickey being charged with having child pornography and made him the main suspect in the murder case. He was brought in for questioning regarding the murder, with authorities hoping for a confession. Despite appearing visibly nervous during the interview, Robert claimed to have been at the Navy base the entire day of Megan's murder, denying any involvement and asserting that he had not left the base. On the day of the incident, after corroborating his timeline with his colleagues, the police realized that there was a period of time during which Robert hadn't been seen, raising the possibility of his involvement in the murder. Surveillance footage from the base was obtained, but no sign of Robert leaving was observed. Nevertheless, he remained a suspect and couldn't be entirely ruled out. A DNA swab was taken from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene, and the results came as a surprise. There was no match. Robert was not Megan's killer. This setback left the officers feeling disheartened, as they found themselves without any leads or suspects. Attention then shifted towards Chris, who had discovered her body. After obtaining a DNA sample, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Additionally, all of Megan's family members, including her younger brother Corey, were also cleared of any involvement. An autopsy later revealed the extreme brutality of the murder, with Megan being subjected to what was termed as overkill. The level of violence suggested intense anger from the perpetrator, raising questions about their motive. Given Megan's popularity and apparent lack of enemies, it seemed likely that the culprit was someone known to her, but with no apparent enemies. The mystery deepened regarding who would commit such a horrific act. As the investigation yielded no suspects, Megan's parents grappled with the unsettling prospect of her case, remaining unresolved, depriving them of justice for their daughter. Detectives decided to delve deeper into Megan's school life, considering the possibility of a clandestine boyfriend, an admirer, or an adversary within her school community. They interrogated Megan's close friend in hopes of uncovering potential leads, but she was unable to provide any valuable insights. Subsequently, police interviewed other acquaintances from Woodrow Wilson High School, revealing that Megan had been involved in a few romantic relationships, but none of them were particularly serious. While none of these individuals emerged as suspects, the authorities decided to collect DNA samples from them as a precautionary measure to eliminate any potential connections. Forensic experts specializing in biogeographical analysis re-examined the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene in an effort to determine the geographical origin of the perpetrator. Their analysis suggested that they were searching for an African-American male. Despite 6 months elapsing with no significant progress in the case, a breakthrough occurred when a cooperative classmate provided the police with valuable information, a list of boys with whom Megan had occasionally engaged in flirtatious interactions. Upon review, all individuals on the list except one had already been interviewed. This exception was 17-year-old Robert Lee Barnes. In addition to her regular school education, Megan had also been enrolled in a performing arts program at Churchill High School, where Robert Barnes was also a participant. Megan had once told her close friend that she believed Robert had feelings for her, feelings she did not reciprocate. Robert Barnes, a talented violinist, was regarded as a diligent student who never encountered any disciplinary issues at school and was not known to cause trouble. He shared a close friendship with Megan and had even visited her home on several occasions, according to her parents, who described him as always polite and very kind. When the police located him for questioning regarding Megan, the interview followed the standard procedure, just like the other previous interviews they had carried out. Robert informed investigators that Megan was a kind and pleasant individual, expressing disbelief at the notion of anyone wishing her harm. He mentioned their participation in a recital together and their occasional hangouts. The police did not find anything suspicious during the interview until towards the end, when they asked Robert if he would provide a DNA sample. Robert hesitated before refusing, which raised eyebrows among the investigators, since all of Megan's other classmates had been cooperative. Robert politely explained that his mother wouldn't agree to it, but the police clarified that parental consent wasn't necessary, especially considering Robert was now 17 years old. Despite this, Robert declined. Once again, the investigators couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Robert Barnes. After concluding the interview, they instructed him to seek his mother's consent for the DNA sample and to contact them afterward. Later, the detective received a call from the lab analyzing the bubblegum. They inquired about the sample's origin, and after confirming that he had observed Robert placing the gum into the glove, questioned whether he had been under constant observation. To their surprise, the DNA, the sample matched that of a female. Robert had switched the gum. He was chewing with a different piece that he provided as his sample. On October 23, 2008, Robert Barnes was summoned for questioning once more, this time accompanied by his mother. During the interview, when confronted with the DNA findings, Robert inadvertently revealed that the incident had occurred on a Thursday. Up to that point, none of the individuals interviewed by the police had been aware of the exact day and date of the murder. When the officers pointed this out to him, he provided an absurd explanation, claiming that on that particular day, Megan had asked him to come to her home, where he allegedly discovered her being held at gunpoint by a masked individual. According to Robert, the assailant then pointed the firearm at him and forced him to tie Megan up. Robert further claimed that he was compelled to sexually assault Megan under duress. Subsequently, he stated that they all went downstairs, where the gunman seized a knife and stabbed Megan. Robert claimed that the assailant then forced him to cut himself, ensuring his blood would be found at the crime scene. Robert had fabricated this narrative in an attempt to present himself as a victim and explain away any potentially incriminating evidence against him. However, law enforcement remained skeptical of his account and did not believe any of his claims. When confronted with the evidence of footprints, they questioned why only his footprints were found and not those of the alleged assailant. Robert's mother intervened, advising him to stop speaking and vouching for his character, claiming he was a good and innocent child. The police collected a sample of his DNA, and the analysis confirmed a match between Robert's DNA and the assailant, contradicting his claims. Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Landowski. The news left Megan's parents in shock, as they could not comprehend how the quiet boy, who used to ride the school bus with their daughter, could be capable of such violence. According to the police, Robert likely gained entry to the home through the window that afternoon, surprising Megan in her bedroom before committing the atrocious acts. Megan managed to flee downstairs, but Robert pursued her, stabbing her with a kitchen knife, and continuing to do so even after her death. Afterward, he left the scene and carried on with his life, as if nothing had occurred. The investigators speculated that Robert had developed an unhealthy obsession with Megan, while Megan only wanted a platonic relationship between them. When Robert's advances were rejected, he resorted to coercion, which ultimately led him down a destructive path that culminated in tragedy. In September 2009, Robert accepted a plea bargain, that spared him from being tried as an adult, as he had recently turned 18. He pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual battery. Robert Lee Barnes was sentenced to 42 years in prison and remains incarcerated at the Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia, whether driven by love desire, bitterness, or the sting of rejection. Robert's actions and atrocious deeds towards someone he claimed to love and care for were not justified. Instead of accepting to move on, he chose a dark path that led to a tragic fate, ending the life of an innocent soul and, in the process, ruining his life and affecting the lives of Megan's loved ones. Megan Landowski's tragic story mirrors countless others, highlighting the perilous consequences that can arise from such situations. We extend our heartfelt prayers and thoughts to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. The case of Romina Nunez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism, the very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself. We can say typical: her husband beat her and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denim of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Nunez? Romina Celeste Nunez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters when she was still a schoolgirl. Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister. Somehow, at the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future, but happiness ended as soon as Nunez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age, will never be able to become a mother again. So there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family, and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more. Money is catastrophically lacking, and Mother Romina had to now support and grandson moving to Spain. Romina depressed by the situation. She wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family, but find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay she still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, when on the road, she left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, for a while deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job in the late summer of 2010. Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty, got a job as an administrator in a hotel, where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home, and for the rest, rented a separate apartment so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Nunez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite, a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children. But nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house, where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain, new lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Nunez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raul Diaz-Tacón. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked this statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raul was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt, and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love, and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises. Almost every day, he arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon, the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Nunez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raul did not maintain any relations, not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant, first-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raul tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raul, promised a long and happy life together, in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation agreed. But only Raul insisted that they need time for 2, so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full. After the wedding, in fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chacon bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raul's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house, but the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months she was perfectly happy alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom, literally on his knees, begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Nunez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened. And on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man, who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her. In the short time they had not seen each other, Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly from her mother borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it. But Nunez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and son saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raul, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull, when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts, and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raul again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself, and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romana's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raul a message, in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police this time. The son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon the wife will cool down and return because before. According to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raul went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raul still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children. So he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raul hiding? Raul was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcers seriously decided to take him seriously, as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details. And others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched, and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Nunez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report, but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit, and in a telephone conversation with his relative, who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case, and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events, according to Raul, his wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home. And when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting, and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down. And when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life, according to his version. The woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death, or even accused of murder. So, Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Sikkim said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard. And since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house, and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts packed in different bags, and a couple of days later went to the car which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island, where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence. Police spent weeks combing the shoreline, in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments, on the bottom aviation and a considerable number of volunteers, but all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence, as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched, using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda, used to remove organic contaminants and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romana's fingernail, with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Ramona. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found and the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Shikona had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers and under pressure of evidence. He did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle, rather than finding her dead in the bathtub, as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018, when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. March 14th, 2003, the Hobbit Pub, Southampton, England. On that evening, everyone at this pub was chilling out. Among them were a girl named Hannah Foster and her friend. Both of them were having a great time there, and when they felt it was getting late, both friends left the pub by 10:50 p.m. Now, since it was quite late at night, Hannah Foster's friend caught a bus from a road named Portswood and headed home. On the other hand, Hannah started walking home because her house was just 800 meters away, roughly 0.5 miles. 3 people lived in Hannah's house. Her father, Trevor Foster, her mother, Hillary Foster, and her younger sister, Sarah. The Fosters were early sleepers and early risers, so they usually went to bed early. They assumed that their daughter would come home, eat, and then go to bed on her own. However, when Hannah's mother woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, she couldn't find Hannah anywhere in the house. Normally, it wouldn't take Hannah more than half an hour to come home, but now several hours had passed. Therefore, Hannah's mother, Hillary, called her daughter, but Hannah wasn't answering any calls. After this, gradually, Hannah's father and younger sister also come to know about her. Following this, Hannah's father, Trevor Foster, calls the girl with whom Hannah went to the Hobbit pub the previous night. But she tells the same story that I've already told you. After this, Hannah's family also tries to find her themselves. But by now, it was already 10:30 in the morning, so Hannah's father starts to worry a lot about his daughter. Because of this, he goes to the Southampton police station and files a missing complaint for him. Now, the police start investigating the missing person case from their side and first trace her phone. Well, the good thing was that Hannah's phone was active, and the police traced the phone through the mobile towers. Naturally, the location of Hannah's phone was showing, approximately 20 to 25 miles away from her home. Now the police reached there within an hour. Where the police found Hannah's phone was the city's recycling center. And along with the phone, they also found Hannah's bag there. But Hannah was not found on March 15th. Hannah is also extensively searched for, but her whereabouts are not found as they continue the search. March 16th arrives, and Southampton police receive a call from an anonymous man from the outskirts of the city. He informs them that he has just seen a girl's body in the bushes. A police team is dispatched to the location provided by the man. Since the previous day, the police have been searching for Hannah Foster, and they also had her picture. Therefore, the police first compare Hannah's picture with the discovered dead body, and they believe it to be Hannah Foster's. Subsequently, Hannah's family is also summoned. And upon seeing a member of their family in this condition, they become quite emotional nonetheless. The body is then sent for post-mortem. The police have to wait for several hours for it, however. When the post-mortem report arrives, it states that Hammer was first written and then murdered by strangulation. However, some traces of the killer's semen were found on Hannah's clothes, and this made the police believe that the case would be solved soon, because DNA would be extracted from the semen and matched with the database to find the killer. But the police's imagination proved wrong when the DNA sample of the killer was not found in their database. Anyway, here, the police losing hope. Check Hannah's call details, which leads the investigators to take another step towards solving this case. Actually, Hannah had last called the emergency number 999 from her phone, and the operator had answered the call. The call lasted for 50 seconds. After that, the police reached the operator and collect Hannah's call recording. From there, in addition, the operator said I kept saying, "This is emergency helpline." What's an emergency for 50 seconds? But there was no response from the other end. When investigators enhanced the recording of Hannah's call, they realize that she is sitting in a moving vehicle. Additionally, there is another faint voice with a South Asian accent. The man asks Hannah questions while she sits quietly, appearing scared and intimidated after obtaining the call recording. The investigating team accelerates progress in Hannah Foster's murder case. Now the police also check all the CCTV cameras in the area where Hannah's friend last bid her farewell and caught a bus. After scrutinizing several CCTV footages from that road, the police eventually narrow down to 7 suspect vehicles. On the other hand, Hannah's parents are eager to see their daughter's killer brought to justice swiftly. They now also discuss these 7 vehicles in public. In the meantime, on March 26th, Hannah's parents talked to people through a local crime TV show called Crime Watch about those cars. As a result, it emerged that one of the 7 suspect vehicles shown on TV was a van belonging to their company. Hazelwood Foods, the supervisor, James Dennis, called in and said that the driver of this van does not have his own vehicle, so he also uses this van to come and go from his home. Furthermore, that night, the driver had gone to deliver on this road. The time and location of the van were exactly where Hannah had started, to walk home alone. After that, the police get a good lead for the first time in this place. with the man driving the van was named Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. Upon speaking to the company supervisor, it was found that on the morning of March 15th, Manager Pal came to work, but there were some marks on his face, whereas there were no marks on his face the previous day. That is on the 14th. Additionally, on March 15th, Maninder only worked half a day and then took half a day off, citing a back pain reason. However, it was only later discovered by the police that Maninder hadn't returned to work since that day. Now hearing the whole story. Investigating officers, along with forensic experts, arrived at Hazelwood Company. Subsequently, the van driven by Maninder was thoroughly examined by forensic experts, and some traces of semen and blood were found in his vehicle as well. With all this evidence, such as Maninder Pal's disappearance, finding semen and blood in his van, they were pointing fingers directly at him for Hannah's murder. However, apart from this, the police once again scrutinized Manager Pal's van through CCTV cameras, and it becomes clear from the CCTV footage that Manager Pal had taken his van to the recycling center on the night of March 14th, and where Hannah's body was found. His van had also passed through that road. Maninder Pal had now become the prime suspect for the police. Therefore, the police now embark on the search for Maninder Pal. And first they go to his home address, obtained from the sandwich company where he used to work. There, Maninder Pal's wife and 2 children used to live. And his wife was a citizen of the UK, but upon reaching there, the police learned something that completely changes the course of the case. In fact, Maninder's wife reveals that he had actually left for India on March 18th because Maninder's mother was very ill. After learning this, it was imperative for the Southampton police to apprehend Maninder POW in the Hannah Foster murder case. But it was equally challenging. And then amidst all this, when a blood sample is taken from one of Maninder Pal's sons, and the DNA is extracted from it, it matches the DNA found on Hammer's clothes and inside Maninder Pal's van. Now, because the son inherits about half of his father's genes, therefore, the DNA of both the father and son is approximately 99.99% identical. It had already been confirmed that Maninder Pal was indeed the real culprit. After that, the police from England contacts India through the government. Now, since Maninder Pal's ancestral home was in the city of Chandigarh, in India, assistance is sought from the police there. Subsequently, the Chandigarh police obtained the address of Maninder's house and reached there here. The police find out that Maninder Pal had come to meet his mother a few days ago, but after staying there for 3 to 4 days, he left. Since then, he has not contacted his home. The police also learn another piece of information from that under Pal's family at home, that when he was in England, he used to wear a turban and keep a beard. But when he came to India, he got a clean shave and also got his hair cut. Until now, Hannah's parents had also found out about their daughter's killer, and they were also waiting for him to be caught. But now the Chandigarh police was not giving this case much priority. By this time, the news of this case had not even appeared in the Indian media, so normal people didn't know much about it. As time passed slowly, there was not much progress in the investigation. A considerable amount of time had passed, so Hannah's parents took it upon themselves to catch the killer. Then about 15 months after their daughter's death on July 10th, 2004, they come to India. At this time, they were only in India for 10 days. After that, they come straight to Chandigarh and speak to the local media there, appealing to catch their daughter's killer, Maninder Pal. Apart from this, Hannah's parents had separate pictures of Maninder. In one photo, he had a beard and a turban, while in another photo, he had shaved his beard and cut his hair. It was easy to identify Maninder through these pictures. After this, Hannah's parents waited for a few days, but then they decided to go to Delhi. Because there are national and international media offices, made a promise that we wouldn't rest. After this step by Hannah's parents, the news of their daughter's murders spread throughout India. Within 24 hours, the headline of every newspaper and news channel became Hannah Foster and Maninder POW here. Hannah's parents also arranged a free hotline so that anyone who knew about the murderer could call this number. The Southampton police here announced, through a news agency called The Sun, that they would give 5 million Indian rupees to the person who provides any information about Maninder Pal. By now, this news had spread like wildfire throughout India. Then on July 15th, 2004, a car driver residing in the city of Darjeeling, in the state of West Bengal, India called a retired police officer whom he knew. Now, this police officer had already retired. The driver called the officer and told him there was a man who has been living here for a few months, and his appearance resembles that of Hannah Foster's killer, as shown in the news. He started appearing here shortly after Hannah's murder. Upon hearing the driver's words, the retired officer immediately sets out to see this man. The officer remembered Maninder Pal's face because they were following this case through the news channel. Afterwards, when that driver showed the police officer the man, the officer was quite surprised. Then he immediately contacted the local police, and the local police caught Menander POW in the bus, going from Kalimpong town to Nepal. Here, the police find out that Menander POW was planning to flee to Nepal after seeing his news on TV channels and newspapers. Besides, the police also find out that Maninder Pal had changed his name to Mike Davis in West Bengal. In addition to Maninder, there was also a woman on the bus. And then it was revealed that Maninder had remarried after coming to India. Now Maninder was arrested and brought to Delhi. And during the custody of a few days here, Maninder confessed to his crime. Then he told the whole story of how he murdered Hannah. That night, the story was something like this, actually. On the night of March 14th, 2003, Manager was parked on that road, drinking in his van where Hannah passed by. But when he saw Hannah, bad thoughts started coming to his mind. Afterwards, he forcibly kidnapped Hannah and placed her in the van. Although there, Hannah requested to be released from Manager. But Manager paid no heed to her requests. In the meantime, Hannah also called the emergency helpline number. But due to Manager's presence, she couldn't say anything. This LED, the call operator, to believe it might be a misdial. Later, Maninder takes Hannah to a deserted area and rapes her. However, after committing the crime, he realizes that if he lets Hannah go alive, she will go to the police and file a complaint. Therefore, Maninder strangles her to death. Then he disposes of Hannah's body where it was found on March 15th. The next day, Maninder takes half a day off from work, under the pretext of a back pain. But he had Hannah's mobile phone and handbag with him, so he dumps them in a recycling bin at the city recycling center. Afterwards, he goes to one of his friends and asks for some money on loan, because he had to go to India to meet his sick mother. However, his friend doesn't have as much money as Maninder needed. Then Maninder comes back home, and also tells his British wife that his mother is sick in India, and he needs to go there and require some money, understanding Maninder's need. His wife talks to her father, and on March 17th, Maninder's father-in-law lends him some money. The very next day, Maninder catches a flight to India. However, the excuse of his mother being sick was just a pretext. In reality, Maninder had come to India to escape from the England police. Upon arriving in India, Maninder goes to Chandigarh. His ancestral home, meets his mother. But here, he completely changes his appearance. After changing his appearance, Maninder goes to Darjeeling, and after some time, he changes his name and marries another woman there, where he starts living thereafter. Now, because neither anyone in India knew about Hannah Foster's murder, nor about Maninder Pals. Maninder wasn't caught for 15 months. But then when Hannah's parents come to India, only then is Maninder caught anyway. After that, Maninder was brought to Delhi. And then on July 28th, 2004, giving an interview to a news channel, he confessed his crime on TV about the boat helicopter. Let's crossing that road as coming above the major pump. My van left parked on this little note that he's lucky. Just the quite loud, I like him. You know, on that road, and that's how I don't get. Then I stopped right away too, and well, I live up, but upon the whole incident. While confessing, Maninder denies and says that night I had drunk a lot. I didn't want to kill Hannah, but when I mocked her. Then Hannah started threatening to complain to the police, although I threatened her a lot. But she didn't agree, which led me to kill her. I wrote, "What the alarm that light puts that my mother is very Lenin here. I want the world was the eyes low. It is very, very vital upon me, and although that her, you know, the beer. I was probably black that might you love me and I done that thing." However, in August 2004, Manager Pal changed to statement. He said, "I didn't do all this willingly, but it was done to me forcibly." After this statement, Melinda was placed under judicial custody in Delhi, and then the process of extradition to Britain begins. This process takes about 3 years, but finally on June 8th, 2007, the court granted permission for Menander Powell to go to England. Once in England, Hampshire police arrest Menander. Then Menander's blood sample is taken, and it matches 100% with the DNA found from Hannah's clothes and semen obtained from the van. After that, from December 10th, 2007, the trial begins in the Winchester Crown Court. Here, Manager appeals not guilty to all the charges against him. Many do said that night, some criminals broke the window of the van and threw Hannah's body inside the van. Now, because they was drunk to trap me, those criminals forced me to rip Hannah, and they may even force to kill her. Even in court, as the Wood Foods Company supervisor, James Dennis testified, but Menander said, "I borrowed 16,000 euros from James, and he is also under the misconception that I am having an affair with his wife. That's why James is targeting me." Menander also said maybe James hired those 3 men to frame me and forced me to commit this crime on the night of March 14th. But in the end, When the police investigated Manenderpal's all statements, it all turned out to be lies. And finally, on November 25, 2008, all the allegations against Manenderpal were proven. After that, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now he will be imprisoned without parole for at least 24 years. At the time of sentencing, he was 41 years old and he will remain in jail until 2030. Of the 5 million rupees reward offered for catching Manenderpal, 367,000 rupees were given to the taxi driver, who first informed the police about Manenderpal. With this, the money was divided among 12 other people. Because besides the taxi driver, Jason Lepcha, those people also played an important role in solving this case. However, Jason used that money to buy land and then established a school for disadvantaged children on it, named the Hannah Memorial Academy in Foster's memory. Then in 2006, when Hammer's parents visited Darjeeling and learned about this, they were very pleased. When these people returned to England, Hannah's parents started a registered charity to help Jason. Along with other people, this now greatly helps Jason Lepcha School. So friends, this was the complete story of the Hannah Foster murder case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Blackburn family on the morning of November 10th, 2015. A car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily gym workout. Just as he was about to step out of his car, a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After concluding the call, Davy leisurely exited his vehicle and entered his house. Upon opening the door, he froze. His gym bag slipped from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood, confused and deeply shocked. He rushed to her side for an examination, felt for a pulse, and immediately dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive, though the living room was in disarray. Items scattered everywhere and her purse emptied upstairs. Their small child was crying. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. Police officers and investigators filled the house. Right after it got cordoned off, Amanda Blackburn was urgently transported to the hospital. Now let's pivot back to understand more about Amanda's background, so we don't miss vital details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Buers was born on July 31st, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She went to school in Indianapolis, Indiana until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There she graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006 and later earned an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida by 2008. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and God's teachings were central tenets of their lives. Her father served as the lead pastor at First Baptist Church in Elkhart. Thus, church sermons and psalter were ingrained in her from childhood. She knew them by heart and honored them wholly. While other children raced toward adulthoods, temptations like parties and first loves, Amanda's passion lay in her faith and her dream of serving Jesus faithfully. Amanda, a blonde-haired, slim girl with a welcoming smile and genuine intentions. Not just beautiful on the outside, Amanda's thoughts and heart were pure. In every action, she displayed love for her neighbor. As a teenager, she took a vow of chastity, promising not to even kiss a man until marriage, and she always kept her word. Amanda's heart raced when she met Davy Blackburn, her true love, a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Davy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a devout Christian family. The two met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson concert, organized by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. At the time, they attended different colleges, but spent every vacation together. Their relationship was purely platonic and free from earthly desires. They enjoyed walks together and shared intimate thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. Their bond grew stronger as they found joy in simple things and joked sincerely with each other. Once before returning to school, they had a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy teasingly called her Milk Girl, realizing then that she was the one he wanted to marry. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship for quite some time,
Constantly messaging via Messenger.
calling each other and chatting for hours. They spent every vacation together. Their respect for the seriousness of their relationship led them to see a psychologist to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1st, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew there was a special bond between them, a part of God's plan. For the first 4 years after their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble. but the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that she move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones. For a time, she struggled with the need to leave South Carolina. Eventually, she relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent, high-profile church on the city's north side. The religious organization started by the Young family focused on young people, as made clear in the weekly videos they posted on their website, which discussed relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. By 2014, the family had welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They were perfectly happy with their comfortable home on a quiet street and their favorite roles within the church. This church was regularly attended by many young people who listened to and believed in their sermons. The family lived in perfect harmony and understanding. However, everything changed on November 10th. 2015 #. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 28 block of Sunnyfield Court. Around 8 a.m., the pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital, where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent several resuscitative. Sadly, Amanda died the next day along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family had been expecting a baby girl who was named Evie Grace at her burial. Her death sparked significant sympathy and prayers on social media. Over an extended period of time, as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davy released an official statement saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone. She dedicated her life to knowing Jesus as her personal Savior, and through passing and legacy, countless others will come to a saving faith in Christ. I firmly believe that God remains good, turning our tragedy into triumph, and that indeed, the best is yet to come, Dave wrote. The murder of the pregnant woman was not only a devastating blow to the entire Orthodox family, but also a profound shock to the entire state. People demanded that those responsible for Amanda and her unborn child's death be brought to justice. In his first interview, Davy Blackburn recounted finding his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially unclothed with her underwear lying nearby, and herself lying face down in a pool of blood. The pastor informed investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center for a workout. When he departed, he left the door unlocked. He mentioned this habit during his statement, saying, "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door." While it's hard to say whether securing the door would have prevented this tragedy entirely, it's evident that it made entry much easier for the criminals involved. Unfortunately, Amanda did not have precious time to contact emergency services, resulting in an attack that left her with 3 gunshot wounds, one of them being fatal. No arrests were made in the days immediately following this heinous crime. However, police quickly determined that Davy Blackburn was not involved in this horrific incident. Trial transcripts reveal additional details from Davy Blackburn's testimony, alongside accounts from witnesses such as Scott Floyd, an emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department, who arrived at their home following Davy's 911 call. According to Scott Floyd's testimony, upon arrival, they found Davy Blackburn outside at the end of the driveway, with blood on his hands but maintaining a very calm demeanor. Scott Floyd stated that Blackburn appeared not to fully comprehend what had transpired with Amanda when they reached him at their residence. Davy claimed he came home from the gym at about 7 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway. He occasionally got out, strolled down the driveway, and peeked through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8 a.m., and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8 a.m. It took him 12 minutes to make that call in an emergency situation. 12 minutes is quite a long time, he repeatedly said. He thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy, and maybe she gotten dizzy and fallen. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room doctor Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot had occurred a couple of hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else after dialing 911. He said he called his father next. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym. Thus, he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted on November 12th showed Amanda suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that went through her biceps, and another one that entered and exited her upper back, Multiple scratches were found on her left cheek, along with a split lip and a knocked-out lower tooth. These injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined. Neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed as well. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsell, mentioned their street wasn't known for incidents like this and expressed shock by stating that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. Everyone thought highly of the Blackburn family. They were seen as wonderful and loving people by their community. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards, as well as MacBook bag robbery, seemed to be an initial theory during this investigation. On the morning of November 10th, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting home invasions, various residences near Blackburn's home. Around 5 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking. The sliding glass door to her apartment was. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary. Someone had broken through the patio screen and entered the house. According to police reports, 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing from the residence. Just 5 minutes after that second call, another individual from Sunnyfield Court contacted emergency services. This time it was Davy Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating potential connections between this homicide and the other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. The police have not disclosed details about the ongoing investigation to maintain its integrity. However, after obtaining images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released these images to the public for assistance in identifying and helping with the investigation. Davy Blackburn expressed confidence that the police department was doing everything within their power to apprehend his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured him that they had unprecedented support to continue their investigation and were optimistic that promising leads would soon help identify those responsible. Key clues instrumental in tracking down 3 suspects included a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were discovered in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, used during the robberies. Authorities recovered this vehicle on November 11th, near Blackburn's home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine ATM camera footage and discovered video showing the driver concealing his face with a stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses' testimonies. And to identify those responsible for these crimes, the results from the DNA testing of the sweater confirmed that J.N. Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification marked the first significant breakthrough in the case. As indicated in the affidavit, cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for a prior burglary. Subsequently, Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also retrieved. These records demonstrated that both Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were present in the vicinity when the crime occurred. The phone records further disclosed that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank, where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor emerged as a critical piece of information when police examined surveillance footage from the area. This footage enabled them to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the subsequent days, reports surfaced indicating that a firearm had been located near the Blackburn residence. According to police, an individual delivered this gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming they had found it outside the couple's home. Crime lab technicians analyzed the weapon. Over 2 weeks of investigation and detective work, police eventually charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old J.N. Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. Another individual, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, who was suspected of burglary, was arrested for a parole violation and not charged with a felony. He did not enter Blackburn's home during the incident. The crime lab confirmed that a gun found near Amanda Blackburn's home was indeed used in committing the crime. All 3 suspects were taken into custody. During questioning, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, explaining he acted out of fear she might scratch him. After she jumped on him after she fell over, he leaned down and shot her in the back of her head, subsequently watching her bleed to death. The criminal trio intended to rob the Blackburn house for money. They chose their target upon noticing that Amanda's husband had left their front door unlocked when he went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to prevent her from interfering. During this confrontation, Taylor struck her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and decided it was time to leave. They already had the stolen bank cards, so they went searching for an ATM. After failing to withdraw $500 from one, they successfully obtained $14 from another. This is when CCTV captured them. They then headed back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle took place inside. Amanda, regaining consciousness after being struck, lunged at the intruder. He tackled her in response. Following this, Taylor placed the stolen debit cards in the accomplice's car, who was at an ATM during the crime. Upon their return, he confessed to shooting Amanda. According to court records, the Blackburn home was their third target on November 10th. Earlier in their first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the residents slept inside that home. They noticed a recording camera but moved on regardless. Next, they broke into another house through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that later helped police identify them. Court documents detail this evidence collected against the suspects. The crucial piece was Watson's DNA, found on the pink sweater, used to cover his face from surveillance as he tried withdrawing cash with Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with authorities. In return for reduced sentences, Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted being near the burglary scene, but claimed confusion about his activities. Formal charges were brought by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including felony murder after knowingly killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson is charged with felony, along with multiple counts of burglary and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody for parole violation, also faces burglary charges. Additionally, there was a 4th person aware of these crimes, but not actively participating in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Hyatt praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly, all day without sleep to solve the murders in the city. With assistance from Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served because the victim was pregnant. Prosecutors said they might consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear had been removed and her shirt pulled up, they stated there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but it ended abruptly when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. This disclosure interrupted the trial, leading to a mistrial being declared. The final trial took place in October 2022. Jury selection was more thorough this time. Over 100 individuals were considered as potential jurors, each having to fill out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate if a fair verdict could be reached. Larry Joe Taylor received an 86-year sentence at the Indiana State Correctional Institution for Amanda Blackburn's murder. And for additional charges related to a home burglary, Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Larry Taylor during the trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. The murder conviction in Indiana can result in a prison sentence of 45 to 60 years, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, potentially adding up to an additional 20 years since Amanda Blackburn was pregnant at the time of her death. Davy Blackburn, Amanda's husband and a church pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death have been apprehended and will no longer pose a threat to anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has touched the hearts of many people, including the chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 individuals. Among those in attendance was Governor Mike Pence. The resident church has set up a donation page to assist with Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn expressed hope for a judicial system that will wisely handle those responsible for his family's immense pain. Remarkably, he has consistently reported that he has chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. I was very relieved to learn of the arrest. He told reporters, although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope.